Hello, and welcome to your Advanced UI Event Systems lesson. Today we're going to dive into what we can do with the UI and some more advanced coding. And we're going to start with the 3D, just getting our basic 3D scene set up. Now, I could use some pretty crazy fancy assets, but really what we need to focus on is the script. So let's go ahead and make a 3D object cube, 3D object plane. Lower the plane a little bit. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and give the plane a box collider instead of a mesh collider. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and add a rigid body to the box. So if we hit play, you see it sits on here. So let's go ahead and drop a camera in here. And I did add a directional light. Game object, camera. Just so we can kind of get this cube in our view, so we can see what's going on with it. Okay. So here's a basic scene with a basic object. Let's go ahead and create a basic UI so we can dive right into the script. I'm going to make a UI panel. Make sure you switch into 2D mode. I am using Unity 4.6, so you should be able to follow along. Okay, now this panel is a bit too big for my liking. So put it about right in the middle on the bottom of the screen. So if we go to our game view, you can see our little panel down there. This is going to be our control panel where we can set up a few different scripts. So inside the panel, go ahead and create UI button. Take this button, duplicate. So it's going to give us 3 buttons. To start, that will be fine. So button 1, button 2, and button 3. Okay. And then we'll change their text as so. Button 1. I typed it in the wrong place here. Button 2. Button 1. And button 3. Okay. So if we go to our game view here, we can see our buttons. Alright, great. So what are we going to do with these buttons? Well, if we hit play, you'll see they already light up, so we don't have to worry about writing a script for that. It's nice. So let's do some stuff, some physics stuff. I mean, it's a way for me to show you how to get into the documentation and how to research. So let's go ahead and get started with that. The next thing actually I want to do is I'm gonna drive my game view down here, so I have somewhat of a preview of what's going on. And I'm going to go back into 3D mode, and I'm going to focus back on my camera. I'm going to move this camera and rotate it just for a better effect. I'm going to take our directional light and add hard shadows. There we go. That's a little bit better. Now we can see what's going on. You can use soft shadows too. Still get a good effect. Okay. So we've already got a rigid body on this cube. What we need to do is write something in our event system that adds force to this cube. So I can show you how to do that. If you want to do something with a rigid body, the first thing you want to do is check your documentation. Okay. unity3d.com/documentation. It's actually docs.unity3d.com/scripting reference. They've changed it a lot. Make sure you're looking at C#. JavaScript's eventually not going to be used anymore, so give me just a second here. I've got pop-up. Okay, I'm back. Alright, so here we are in the Unity scripting reference. So first, let's look for rigid body. Anytime you want to do something with physics, look at rigid body. And we're going to add force. So you can see here we can go to rigid body, or it gives us all these other options automatically. And luckily they've fixed the speed of their website since the last video I recorded. So there's all these different options, and I'm going to add explosion force, just because this is a really good way to show some randomness and show that you can actually do some pretty cool stuff with a pretty simple script. So what this says here is rigid body, which is the component we're accessing, .add explosion force. So this is the method we're calling. This is what we're doing with the rigid body. Okay, so if you set up a script similar to what they have here, so a good way to start when you're starting a script, against all better judgment, copy and paste. And I know that sounds silly, a lot of people tell you not to do it, but it's a really good way to get started, and you can go through and adjust these variables yourself and see what's happening a lot faster than writing it from scratch. Or you could just write what you see on the screen here, because essentially you can make a different name for radius, a different name for power, a different name for explosion position. But I'll go ahead and go through these after I show you what it does. So we're going to create C# script. I'm going to call this add explosion force. I'll pause it while Mono develops coming up. Alright, I'm back. We're here in the class that we just created. Let's go ahead and get rid of all this. Rename example class to the name you created for the class. So add explosion force. Okay, and I'm gonna go through here and explain kind of what this stuff does. This is the radius of the explosion. So if we set this at 0, the explosion's not going to do anything. So the bigger the radius, the further the force gets pushed. So if you imagine it checking in a circle, that's kind of what it does, or in a sphere. And then the power of the force. And so our start function, and this is calling it in start, and we're not actually going to do this because we don't want to just do it off the bat, but I do want to show you kind of what it does. So explosion position equals transform.position, collider's physics, overlap sphere, collision position, and radius. So that's the sphere I was talking about, that it checks this radius, and then at the position of explosion position, which is the vector we just created. So essentially, we would attach this script to whatever object we're wanting to throw at other objects to make it explode. So you could put this on the object itself, but we're going to attach it to a secondary object. It checks for all colliders within the sphere, and then for each collider hit, if it's hit and it's a rigid body, then you add explosion force multiplied by the power, explosion position, radius, and this is the time, I believe. You can double check that. So you go back to the Unity documentation. Force mode force, which we're using force mode force. So this is the upwards modifier. Okay. So basically that's saying more of the force is going to go up than other directions, which is fine. Okay. And another thing you can do is if you check this function here. Oh, come on. It should tell us what this does. Yeah. It shows you the float, the vector 3, the float, and float. So what each of those variables actually is, it describes them for you right here. So that's another way you can kind of get around having to go back and always check this documentation. So let's go ahead and file, save the script, go back into Unity. We're going to create another object, game object, create empty. And we're going to copy the cube's position. So right click on the transform, copy component, go back to the empty game object, paste component values, which puts it in the center of the cube. We're going to bring it down a little bit so it's not through the floor. And we're going to go to our cube and we're going to go ahead and take off gravity. And let's go ahead and play. Okay, let's go a little bit closer to the ground. Perhaps our radius isn't quite right. Okay, so our add explosion force is not working for a second, so let me check something. Okay, I'm back. What I realized I created this empty game object and didn't add this explosive force. So I went ahead and added it. Let's crank power up to 100 and radius to 10. The reason I had you turn the gravity off is just so I could demonstrate something. If you hit play now, you see it starts raising up, okay? And the reason is the upward force on this add explosion force. The problem is, because this is happening during the start function, if we add gravity to kind of give it a more realistic look, you'll see it kind of just stops. So we need something to add to have it happen before, because I mean in a game things aren't always just going to be sitting in place, they're going to be coming towards things, and we want to be able to interact with moving objects and not just with solid objects. So we're going to go ahead and do something with our event system to make that happen. So we got our gravity back on, we got this add explosion force script. Let's go ahead and change this from start to a different name of a function. So let's make our own function name. Let's call this function add explodes force. Go ahead and copy the name just because it'll make it easier on us. Okay, and then let's go into our game object here and we're going to select one of these buttons. So when we hit this button, we're going to on click. This is button 1. We're going to grab our game object and drag it into here, grab function, add explosion force, and we're going to use send message string. And we're going to insert the name of the add explosion force method that we made. So what we're doing is when we click on this, we're accessing this rather than doing it at the start. So let's see what that does. Okay, so here we are. For some reason it's not showing my UI. Okay, so button 1. There we go. And now you see we can easily interact with physics and scripts. And so now we can easily adjust this as well. So let's go to game object. Let's make it like 1,000 power. See what happens. Now when we hit button 1, boom. And it'll come back down. There it goes. 500. Get a nice spin going on. And see, this is with a simple click, a simple event. We're accessing this code, this entire function here, we're accessing with the onClick event with this button. So now let me show you something a little bit more advanced. I want to show you if we lose this box, I want to show you how we can get it back. So let's make another function. I'm going to call this function, and actually we're going to make this in a separate script. Let's go ahead and make it on our cube. Go to add component, new script. We're going to call this reset object, and this would be useful for mini games, racing, Mario Kart. When you fall off the track, it resets you back on the track. So this is a really useful code, and we can easily access this with our new UI event system after we write the code. So let's call it reset object. Okay. So let's go into our reset object. Okay, and in this one, I'm gonna show you how to kind of wing it. And the thing is, sometimes what you need just isn't in the documentation. There's no documentation on resetting the object, and if you did a search for it online, there's so many different methods. I'm gonna show you the best way I would do it. So we're gonna make a couple different variables. Private transform this transform. Private you know, I think that's you know what we need? Private transform this transform. And we're gonna grab this in the start, and we're gonna make another private vector 3 called this position, and we're gonna say this position equals this transform dot position. Okay, and what we're doing is we're grabbing this transform's position, and really you could say transform dot position, but we're not going to do that. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a function here, another one we're going to call with an event, and we're going to call this function reset object. Okay, and let's go ahead and copy the name. Just makes it easier for us to put it in later. And we're gonna say transform dot position equals this position. And we're gonna do this when we call the reset object script. And we could add more in here. We could add a linear interpolation to make it reset slowly. We're just gonna have it instantly transform back. So we got a file save. Okay, so let's go back into Unity and let's find our button 2. On this one, we're going to drag the cube into the onClick event. We're gonna go to function, reset object, which is the name of the script we make, and send message string. We're going to send the message reset object, which is going to call our reset object. And so you see how powerful this could be. You call anything in script from these buttons here. So let's hit play and test out our theory. It's not set to an instance of an object. And of course, because we didn't add the script again. So that was my fault. Let's go to reset object, drag this onto our cube script. Now we hit play. Button 1. Let's go ahead and crank our button 1 up. Is this still okay? So that should be okay. Alright, so let's okay, so there's 2 of these on here. Give me just a second here. Let me figure out why this is